We're going to start this morning with one of the we know we've been trying to end with what are the practices of joy, right? But I thought if we started with the practice of joy, maybe we'd have a little bit more time, right? Because sometimes it gets slid in the back and we don't spend a lot of time on it. So last week, the thing was to bring to the front of your mind something of which you were afraid or feared, right? Or no, Sharon, that's not going to work. I have these lovely green chairs. Why don't you come up here? I would love to have you closer. I might even say, here's what, no one will see me on the screen though, but I'm only doing this in case someone tunes in from outer space. Thank you all. I know it's not a problem. I appreciate it. I really do. Good morning, Erin. I see you. Erin's working in the nursery. Okay, so a practice. So that was bringing to the front of your head in a quiet time something that of which you either are fearful about, something that makes you angry. Although we didn't talk a lot about anger last week, that was included in your reading, and I'm going to go back to it. This is the way that we develop this mental immunity that they talk about. This way that we don't let our thoughts become our life. That difference between what is and what we think it is. How often do we get tripped up by that? How often do we make a perception about something, act a certain way, continue down that path for way too long, usually, and then we have a reconciling moment where we find out, maybe I should just use the first person, where I find out that I have been wrong about my perception and therefore made a bunch of intermediate steps that were also not very helpful. Possibly to no one else. Possibly no one else even knows. I think I've done internal damage then. Is this making sense? Like you've had that experience. I'm not giving you something specific, but talking more in general terms. If I think of a good example, I'll let you know. Because most of my life, I think, is that way, where I allow my thoughts to become what I feel and what I do. Because I feel like I need to trust something. And based on the lack of information, rather than asking questions, perhaps, I go with, what I think is happening. What might have happened before, which might have been accurate before, right? I have this thing about, oh my God, there's no men in here with beards. Okay. So I have this thing about men with beards. And it is just a trigger. And it's not a very good one. So I can make all kinds of assumptions about it before I've even, thank you for shaving, but no. It's not mustaches. It's not the kind of coolly 3-day growth situation. I'm talking about the full-on beard. Even when Robin Williams wore a beard for a while, I couldn't watch him in any movies, listen to him do stand-up, see him on a Tonight Show, whatever it was. I was like, no, scary, turn that off. So that's not quite what they're saying, but that's what I'm coming up with today, how I can use a thought, a perception to think that someone was going to hurt me, that someone had ill intent, that someone was a narcissist, that so I can just, there's a whole line of things that I think someone who wears a beard is. I don't think those are true. Okay, what did that have to do with the meditation? Why don't you talk to me, please, about how this process, or if you're able to, or what stops you, whatever you want to say about this process that we're asking you to do when you think of it, of meditation. Maybe this is something you've always done. Maybe this is brand new. Can you just anything you want to say about any of it?
Okay, I wish that I had known about, not that somebody didn't do meditation hundreds of years before that. I wish I had known about and embraced or studied meditation in my 20s, 30s, 40s. It would have, I think, saved a lot of burdensome pain that probably did not need to be there.
It's a great
Day late,
observation.
the dollar short.
Maybe not.
I mean,
Sometimes we're not ready. So I just would offer that. Sometimes we're just not ready. And so it's not a woulda, coulda, shoulda thing, although I hear you. I do hear you, you know. My friends used to say, don't go shouldn't on yourself, you know, so try to avoid that when we can. I wish I would have come up with that, but I did not. Thank you, though, Nancy. I think that's true. We can spend a lot of time with that, and I do think, and you might, and if any of you agree with this, you can say that. There are times in our life when certain things work. There are times in our life when certain things just don't seem to fit. You know, I tried as a young mom to do meditation. What a ridiculous thing.
that's what I was thinking of. So thank you for-
Oh my goodness, that's why I wanted to say it. You know, if I got up a half an hour earlier, my children got up a half an hour earlier. It's like they had that radar, you know, there's like, oh, mom's up. So that didn't work. Otherwise, I never would have gone to bed. I could have just stayed up. I tried to do it at night, but I was exhausted, you know. So our prayers, I think Anne Lamott wrote this cute little book called Wow, Help, Thank You, right? And in it, she says those are our three basic prayers.
That's right.
Help and wow, and that's amazement, and thank you and gratitude, right? So sometimes that's all we can do. That's it. But then what a joy, I'll use that word, what a joy when we find a prayer practice that suits us and the time of our life. So if meditation is working, you know what, I always wanted to have a centering prayer group of like young moms. It was like my dream. And I've tried in every parish I've ever served, and it has never happened. Right? No, you know who I get? I get you, Nancy. I get Ginger. That's the people who want to pray, who have time, who have space, who can be quiet with their own thoughts, or be comfortable letting go of their own thoughts, or whose grocery lists and lists of things to do maybe is shorter, or they understand how it's slotted and the urgency of it, or like me thinking they're probably going to forget it if they don't think of it right now. All right, thank you for that observation. Anyone else about meditation and what you're doing, how it's working? It's not a check-in like I'm doing it great, I get 100. No, it's like I tried it, it's hard. Yeah.
Well, my sanctuary, my place of quiet has always been my garden. And as I get older and I'm not physically able to garden as much, or as I've lived in these mountains for 20 years and my growing season is so much shorter, I don't have that time and space like I used to. And it's real obvious to me because I'm not good during these cold winter months. And the winters just get longer because my body is working because I can't be outside and do the things that I used to do. So yeah, that's just my space. And it's no sacred space for me. When I ask for help in my garden from my very willing husband, it's also a space where there are no expletives used in there. Out there having to move this boulder that I moved, won't move, things like that. So it's obvious that is my space.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the meditations that we're going to talk about today, he includes a walking meditation, right? And a more active, a physical sort of way, that because I know a lot of us are having a difficult time attending to just sitting, right? So he says that maybe it's a possibility, and this is Bishop Tutu, who takes a walk every morning and uses that in addition to the three other things, the reading of the mystics, the Eucharist, the ways that he inclines his life. He must get up at 3:30, or did get up at 3. So, he uses a walking meditation as a way to sort of get in rhythm with his life, with his prayer. And I think that's what a movement. So I love the labyrinth. How many of you have ever done that form of meditative prayer? That's a walking prayer. And I can tell you that of the times I've done it, I have never left the labyrinth not feeling like somehow that I've gotten rid of some hap, and also that I've opened my heart to receive God's blessing or whatever words of wisdom. So it may not be the structure of the labyrinth may not work for everyone, right? But that process whereby we agree to let go of some stuff. That's the thing about prayer. It's about us letting go of some things, our perceptions, our thoughts that can get us into what we've already talked about, some trouble, or we might miss some things. Maybe it's not even trouble. Maybe it's what we miss along the way when we're closed up. I always use this image of the fist. It's very hard to receive anything good with this posture. When we come to the altar rail, we come like this. I mean, not now. Now we come and take our wafer. In the past, in the old days, we put our hands out like this to receive the bread. You couldn't receive any bread like this. We can't receive the love of God, I think, fully. I'm not making any judgments about how God works because, Lord, I've known God to work with people with closed hearts, stiff necks, closed fist, whatever. That's God's forte. As to Rob's sermon today, God is still continuing to work on the older brothers in us.
I think it takes time to find the time for meditation. It depends on your stage of life. I can remember that there was a time when I actually could take a bath by myself. That was a good time to have rest and peace and talk to God and listen. And take a walk outside. Might not be gardening, but actually being out in fresh air and seeing the leaves and the trees. So your special time moves to different places depending upon where you are in life. It's a great habit to have a special time.
And so the word that I'm looking for, Ginger, that you brought up is intention. That's what we call intention. And this is what both His Holiness and the Archbishop talk about. They talk about intention. Yeah.
Allison, for me, I always go back to one of the prayers in the prayer book in the back that says, by return and rest we shall be saved. And I have to keep reminding myself, you have to return, you have to rest for all of the preoccupations that we have.
Thank you.
And I mentioned the other day, I think it's best that I'm trying to discern getting rid of some of the silly things that I'm involved in doing and focusing on what's important. And the only way to do that is to return and rest with prayer, meditation.
If you read any of what I like to call, those mystics, the people who lived 500 years ago or whatever, there's a certain quality to their writing that's like that.
That's because they were resting.
That's exactly right. They knew the value of that. And you'll see that come through in all of their written work. That's
to the point
important.
now where I hate watching TV because it just drains you of that spiritual space.
Do podcasts count? I don't know.
No, not you.
No, we all have a thing that we do. Mine right now it doesn't matter, but true crime podcasts are probably not prayerful.
Some of them have moral themes.
No, they're just mostly a distraction, right? Okay. Anyone else want to say anything about this? And what I want, so the intention piece, which is, Vic is also talking about this idea to rest and return. That's intentional. And so setting this intention, and the way that we were encouraged in the last week's meditation, the intention was, what are the things about which you find fearful? What are the things about which you are worried? What are the things, what are the people for which you still harbor maybe hate, distrust, animosity? I don't know, you name the vocabulary that fits for you. So whatever that is. So, being able to lift those folks up, those things, those situations up, and to try to work some steps around. So that's what the Dalai Lama called, analytical. That's the way he referred to that. That was to analyze, not synthesize, no, but analyze. And because we all kind of, in the Western world particularly, which I think is interesting, we consider him an Eastern philosopher and spiritual leader, but it is a Western quality, this analyzing thing that we do. We all do it. We all do it. We like to take things apart, right? We like to figure out what's happening because that gives us some satisfaction. But this is also goes a one step further than that. This is the part that is spiritual. We can analyze all kinds of stuff. I can analyze the cost of chicken at Ingles. Why has it gone from this to this and what's happened in between? The question being then, what is my spiritual response to that? Sometimes that's more integrated. I get that. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes we just kind of leave that off and say things. I say, oh, God will take care of that. I do that a lot.
Thank God he does.
Yes, Ginger, there's that. However, as we were talking last Wednesday night, I have a responsibility too, right? In a covenant relationship, not just God, there's me. So those covenants that God made with God's people still are God's people are still us. We as them. So we have a response to God's love for us. Now that response can be, I'm just going to love God back. Okay. God works with that too. I'm just going to work with that too. But we also might have something deeper going on inside of us that God's stirring up. And I think these meditations can get to that a bit. And even if it's more, maybe even if it's just, I don't mean to say that there's levels here, but even if it is just, it is well with my soul. There's a lot to be said with well with my soul. Vic, what I hear you saying is that things in your soul are a little bit stirred up. It's, you want to, that's a prayer.
It's a long way to Charleston, about 5 hours.
Okay, so things get stirred up, but we don't normally do anything unless we're stirred up. We don't. We're folk who like the status quo. I get that too. But God stirs us up. So if this book is stirring you up, or these meditation practices are stirring you up, thanks be to God. Thanks be to God. And if you want to talk more about this, call Rob or I. You know what? These are like the moments we live for. Somebody calls us, wants to have a spiritual conversation, not about the ceilings leaking in Heinz Hall and what's happening in the Memorial Garden or what's wrong with those parking lot lights. I mean, or Allison's voice isn't loud enough. Whatever it is, it's fine. But really, that's what we're here for too, right? It may be the part we like, and I do like that part too. I like teaching. What else would anybody say about meditation before we start talking about despair? Have I been putting this off? Despair and sadness and frustration and grief. None of you all have experienced any of this, right? This is the most joyful group of people I've ever seen.
One of the things that really struck was the idea if I feel and how I get over that is pray for that person. As suggested in here for 2 weeks. Sometimes it took me longer. And when I heard this suggestion, I said, this is a long time ago.
that can't work. How did that work? But I guess I was desperate enough to try it. And I couldn't, which people, well, they be happy and they have joy and God bigger into it. And, you know, the first day I say those things, I'm like, I'm going later. Right again, I do. So that's one of the things that has helped me. And when I saw this, I thought, oh, you know.
Thank you for sharing. Because I think that's the other key point. It didn't feel that way right away. It felt silly or ridiculous, or how would this work when nothing else has worked? Because then you learn. What we learn about prayer is that it's not about changing the person for whom we're praying, or not about changing God or outcome. It's about changing us. And we're changing the receptacle to receive the joy that the authors of these books feel that is inherent in God's creation. That joy is a fruit of the Spirit. That joy is something that God gives each of us. Now, sometimes we have to clear the bramble. We got to do that work. We got to help clear that bramble for others. Yes, all that's true, but it's there. So when I came in today singing, I've got the joy, 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 joy down in, right? That joy is there. Just sometimes that's what it takes. It doesn't mean, see, here's the other part. It doesn't mean we haven't had grief. I'd like to have anybody raise their hand in here who's not experienced grief. Not seeing that. Sadness. Not seeing that. Fear. Not seeing that. Anger. No. We talked last week a bit about our ability to deny certain things in our life. Sure. We can put them on hold for a minute. But we know the cost of it. We know the cost of that. It may seem familiar, may seem all that stuff, but there's a cost. The cost of facing each of those in whatever way we can, how we can. The book is helping us. The meditations help us. Their conversations around these issues help us to sort of see what we could, see our way to experience the joy that I think is in our hearts, that is recoverable. What else do you want to say? I just have this one little handout that I found last week. I get this little nonviolent life. See, I feel like I'm trying to learn how to live a nonviolent life. That doesn't mean I go around punching people, but it means the thoughts that I carry, what's in my heart, is frequently. Can you help with this, Laura? Yeah. Are not taught nonviolent. I've taken classes about nonviolence, taught nonviolence, yet I still. Someone cuts me off in traffic, I do not have a nonviolent response. Anyway, Bishop Tutu, last week we talked about Ubuntu, right? This happened to pop up then on my news feed on Monday, right after we talked about it. So I just thought maybe this would help with that understanding of that word. This is what he wrote. And then there's that beautiful picture of him smiling. Who could not love Bishop Tutu in that face? Okay. Ubuntu is very difficult to render into Western language. It speaks of the very essence of being human. When we want to give high praise to someone, we say they have Ubuntu. Then you are generous, you are hospitable, you are friendly and caring and compassionate. It is to say, my humanity is caught up, is inextricably bound up in yours. So this idea that when we pray for someone for whom we have a problem, because we are linked to them. And when those links are broken, what do we call that? Sin. That's what we call that. That's what we call that in the church. We call that sin. Joy helps us reconcile our sin because we feel the need to reconcile. There's been times in my life I did not feel the need to reconcile. Like I felt self-righteous about my pain, or self-righteous about an injury, or self-righteous about something. Like, look how good I turned out in spite of all the crap. Right. Wow, yes. Because that's in the church, we say amen. But my heart, but it's still sin. Maybe there's a stage, right? There's a stage. I'm thinking about the forgiving father today in the parable. There's a stage we go through. We do that work. We do that hard work, but we come back to that. We come back to ourselves. We come back to that. And sometimes we can be healed of that. That's the reconciling work of God. Now, do we have to do something? Yes, but it's still God's work in us. But we have to, like Lynn couldn't have a garden as fertile as the mountains are. Lynn could not have a garden if she doesn't do the hard work, right? It's just not going to grow. You could have chickens too without the hard work. Chickens have been around for 1 million years. But would I get a dozen eggs every other week from you if you weren't doing the hard work? Probably not. So we have, there's a partnership, and isn't that wonderful? All right. Let's go to my cheat sheet here so I can remember what it is I read. So we're reviewing this thing about this mental immunity, just like we have all built up our COVID immunity by taking dare I say all of us, but a booster shot, taking our liposodal C, that's my vitamin kick of the week, my vitamin D3, whatever. Yeah, yes, I'm seeing the nods out there. My magnesium, these are the things I take. We could probably compare our medicine cabinets. They're probably very similar. But these are the things I take to stay healthy. They're right there. So how do you remember? Can we review a bit? How do we build up our mental immunity or stress resilience so that we are not in the bed when something terrible happens? Or maybe something not terrible, but whatever, it affects us terribly. How do we not just go back to square one, curl up in a fetal position and lie on the floor? Again, maybe I'm just speaking from my own experience. What is our resilience? How do we build up our resilience? If we need to cheat, I put the page number there. Page 96. Listen, I've been working with kids trying to teach them stuff about confirmation. I know how to go back.
You have to turn it from a threat to a challenge.
There you go.
That's you.
No, it's fine. Some people learn by hearing you say that, right? I've read it 6 times. I couldn't have told you what it was. I had to give myself the number. But now that I know that Ruth said turning a threat into a challenge, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll remember that. Does anyone have an example that you feel comfortable enough to share about that? Because this is personal stuff. Yeah.
This is kind of silly, but it's
No.
very real. I had a fear of going to the dump because the first time I took my recycling to the dump, I got a flat tire. I got a big old bolt on it. And I didn't quite get the flat tire. I was driving up 107, 50 miles an hour or whatever, 40 miles an hour, and and I went straight to the garage, and thankfully they fixed it. But I had this fear, so I would always make Miles go to the dump. Well, he's been out of town, so I need to go take the recycling. Okay. First thing I'm going to do is turn this into a challenge, and I can meet this challenge. And what's the worst thing that can happen? I get another flat tire. Well, there are a bunch of people around that they can help me with this. I can call the garage; they'll help me with it. So this week I did that, and I went and I did not get a flat tire. I left all my recycling, even from electronic stuff that's been piling up. And I was so happy that I could face that silly threat that it was really stressing me out. It was dumb. I knew it. So threat challenge.
Thank you. Beautiful. Yes. Let's do it. Come on.
Although still the mouse was back.
Well, you won't have to then.
You can still be afraid.
That's right. Anyone else have anything? And so if we all have stress, how do we respond? That's on page 98.
You're anxious.
This is what Rob was talking about last week. This is the fight or flight response. This is why this is a review. We're just reviewing this, right? This is what we do. Flight, fight, or freeze. And there also now there's the fourth category that somebody is a therapist was telling me, now I can't remember it. So it's probably not going to be helpful if I can't think of it. But how do we respond to a threat? It's just thinking about it. It's just taking that moment between that space to consider it. I notice it because I get a tightness in my throat. That's how I get it there, because I think there's a connection between me talking, voicing something of which, that's something that I'm afraid of, and then, or fearful of, right? And it's connected to me speaking it. So I can feel it here. For other people, they might feel it right in their gut or their solar plexus. Some people will feel it physically, like your hands will get numb, or your feet will get numb, or your stomach will hurt, have the urge to go to the bathroom. I mean, I'm talking, this is the way, whatever's connected, all those things. So we recognize what that is, and then we sometimes have to think a little bit about what is that? Catherine said that thing that when she feels triggered or feels manipulated, that was one for her. What's happening here? What's that thing that's going on with me? I want to just get out of the room. Or I want to punch that guy in the nose, right? These are strong. These are strong. So this meditation process is back connected to that. That helps when we can recognize that, we can take that to prayer. We can maybe just notice it. Oh, I'm noticing. I'm noticing that my throat is closing up, and I'm noticing, Rob, I'm thinking of our interchange at lunch 2 weeks ago, where I didn't speak. When confronted with something that was very personal to me, and then normally I would have, but I don't know well, and it was in a public place, so God protected me in that sense too. I don't think my response would have been well thought out. It wouldn't have been at all. So step one, fear and frustration are facets of the mind, not of reality. We don't have to let them control our lives. And if we wish, we can find joy in any situation. I'm still working on step one. Step two, try not to criticize ourselves. I'm looking at this audience of mostly women. This is where we go first. I coulda, shoulda, woulda. If I only had, most circumstances are out of our control. Rob's heard me enough talk about things, and he gives me that kind of dog look like, really? How is that your problem? But step three, in circumstances we cannot change. This is like the serenity prayer, beloved, isn't it? In circumstances we cannot change, we accept the situation and use it as an opportunity to exercise patience. And that's a virtue, and it's a gift of the Spirit. Now, I know Paul wrote these things down. I'm talking about St. Paul, but I hope that they came to him by divine means. Meaning, I don't think he just made them up. Meaning, I hope that they're connected in some way to God. So there's step three. So we've got 3 steps. This is in my mind. This may not be reality. This doesn't have to control me. 2, I'm not going to criticize myself. Step 3, I'm going to try to accept it and exercise patience. What are some tools that you use to help relieve your stress? Jane.
I used to, when I taught college, I would build up all this anxiety before trying to teach. And I guess even sometimes to the extent of over preparing. And you would think that time after time after time, when I was happy with the class, when I walked out, that would teach me that, it's not going to be that way. It's not going to be horrible like you think. You're going to do fine, But I just built up so much anxiety that it was uncomfortable, really uncomfortable. Well, nowadays, when I build up anxiety, it's usually about, most of the things we worry about aren't gonna happen, but, it's if I'm in charge of something big and I don't feel like I'm really in control of the situation, or I'll probably mess up when I do this. But then when I get there and I get into it, I'm fine. I relax and I'm fine, but it's the dreading doing it. So this year I've started, as soon as I start feeling that anxiety, and it may be a few days before or whatever, I pray and I ask God to please relieve my anxiety about this. And it works so often, I mean, like every time, that now I'm afraid, how many times can I ask this? Everybody get really tired of hearing it, like every time I have to do so-and-so, it's really tired. And so how long can we go on like this? But so far it's working fine, beautifully. I wish I'd known that when I was teaching college. I mean, I guess I didn't know it. I didn't do it. I should have, if I'd known how consistently he works.
I'm glad it's working for you now. And I hope that when Jesus said, how many times do we have to forgive someone? 70 times 7. I hope the same applies to how often will God hear my prayer? I hope God will always hear our prayer. And that's a great example. Thank you. I certainly identify with it. The first week we did barrier breakers, I felt like it was a complete disaster. It wasn't. But in my mind, I went home thinking, oh my, because the technology didn't work and the thing and and it was fine. People came back the next week. So it was fine. It was fine. Anyone else who are recognizing those things? Many of you have talked about that already. What we didn't talk about last week is that when we're frustrated, what can happen frequently when things don't go the way we have anticipated that they would go, we develop frustration. And from our frustration, they make this direct connection to anger. Right? I put in an extra step, which I call resentment. I don't usually fully go with frustration. I just go right to resentment. There must be someone I can blame. And I've preached on this, y'all, so there must be someone I can blame for whatever terrible thing is now happening. That's why I no longer host Thanksgiving dinner at my house. Because I'll just go right to resentment. Like I won't. Yes. And then I just end up not happy all the way around. That's the way I eliminated that stress. And I didn't do it without talking to people. I did do it, but I just thought, I'm happy. I'll bring 8 dishes. I'll clean the dish. I'll clean up afterward. I'll write the name cards, whatever, but I can't do it at my house anymore. Because unless you guys are okay with getting it all from Ingles, and opening the boxes. I'm fine with that too. Because there's something in between there, I guess.
Allison, for me, I use the stages of grief a lot.
Yes.
You
You want to talk about those a little bit?
Well, yeah.
I don't remember them also. I do.
I pull myself down through when I identify where I am. But Kubler-Ross says that it's denial, anger, bargaining, and she calls step 4 depression. I call it sadness, because you don't have to be clinically depressed. And then it's acceptance. And then from acceptance, that's the only bridge that I have to a 12-step program, where step 1 is I'm powerless over this, my life's unmanageable. Now, I can't get there from any of the other steps, so it's important to pull down. So I'm just going to give you a fast example so you can see what I mean. So I go to Ingles after church because there's company coming to the house at 1 o'clock for dinner. And there's things that I need to get. And so I get in there and I got my cart full and denial. Are you kidding me? They have 8 registers and 1 is open. That's it. And so then I go to, I slide then down into anger. This is stupid. I'm not going to shop here anymore. These people make more money than God. And then it's bargaining, and you all have seen me there. I got my cart, and this line looks like it's going to open, and the light over there went on. And so the bargain is, I'm going to find the best one. And then the sadness comes when I look at my watch and realize they are going to arrive at my house before me.
from that step can be very short, and that's the step that we have to be willing to sit in. The others can last for years. But if you can sit through that and fall into acceptance or identify it and pull yourself through. So acceptance for me is looking at the clock, they're gonna be there first. And so the deal is I pull the National Enquirer off the rack and I read about the monkey baby born to the lady in Pennsylvania. Because I have no control over English. None. And I have to consider my locus of control. I'm powerless over them. And they're the only grocery store. So that's just an example. And I use that concept.
Thank you. And then what we are supposed to get, right? Like one of the things when we go through that is that we come to some sort of compassion. This is what I wonder about for you.
Yeah.
Can you come to compassion for the people who work at Ingalls, for your guests, for yourself?
For me, here's how. Compassion is so much easier to feel than hatred and how am I going to fix them? And I would like to talk to the manager and somebody's got to do something about that. So I can land here. For me, it's Ephesians 6, having done all, stand. I got on all the armor. The only thing not covered, this is a breastplate, he says. So don't cut and run. Don't cut. Having done all, stand.
Thank you.
And that's my process.
Yeah, thank you. And when I can see, because although I'm not a linear thinker, and I might go those steps, very circuitous
And
route.
we do, that's
Right.
the emotional roller coaster. We go
Right.
back
It's
through it.
not, some people do. Some people are like, step 1, step 2, step
No,
3,
no, no,
step
no.
4. I am not. I am like, I go back to the beginning. I'm like, it's like playing sorry. Whoops. You just lost all your pieces, chicken. You're going back. Okay. So, but somewhere in there, what I want, what you want, what I want for you, and I think Bishop Tutu and His Holiness want is us to this compassion piece. And how does all of that fit together? Can we, from that, get some sort of way through feeling compassion, shared passion? That means I see your, this is Ubuntu again, right? I see your sorrow. I see your pain. I see your frustration. I see your anger. I see your disappointment. That's compassion. We share in that. Some of us have compassion overload. This is why I'm happy to hear Vic is not watching television anymore. Because sometimes that's what happens to us. Those of us who are in this industry, meaning church or social services or teaching or, you know what I mean? Sharon, you've been through that. You've been with those boys, this work, Janie, Nancy, this work. We can have compassion overload, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can, that's because we're not taking care of ourselves, basically. Unfortunately, that's what it means. I mean, I know when I'm having it, I know it means I haven't taken care of myself. So we can go back and we can redo our own steps. How is it that we, manage stress in our lives? How is it that we are doing that? And I hope this is a way to do it. Some people do it by taking Xanax. I understand that. Sometimes it works for a while. Having a cocktail at 5 o'clock, whatever the thing is, those things work for a while.
I don't want to say it's not, that's not an easy ride for me every time. I mean, Ingalls is easy, that is my choice. But, the problem is we need to have a willingness to sit in the sadness. That's the beginning of reality, to just realize I can't do anything about this. But I frequently run back to, but wait a minute, it's not, I'm a smart person.
This isn't rocket science, brain surgery. Yeah. Thank you. All right. So the counterintuitive part of compassion is that when we're sad, we can actually have a positive outcome from that. This is what, thank you for, being my prompt. my straight guy. Yeah, well, that was kind of a joke, wasn't it? I know, it was I know. The Dalai Lama talks about his teacher's death. A teacher that was very important to him and how devastated he was by the death, but he used that sadness to become part of who he was, who he is. Well, he's dead, but who he was. It spurred him on to greater learning. A lot of us have had that experience where something that was of great sadness to us propelled us forward. People who thought we couldn't do something then became the reason we did it. That's a story for another day, beloved, because it's 10 till. So I'm going to skip on to, I want you to think about that, and maybe Rob will review with you next week, this thing. We're going to meet next week, and then we'll be off for 2 weeks, so you catch up on all your reading. Despair. How do we find joy in the midst of the enormity of human problems and suffering? Can we look on page 115 and see what our wisdom seekers have said? We only have one more week of this kind of loneliness, despair, sadness. Then we're going to move on to the pillars. All right, 115. Dalai Lama says, oh no, the Archbishop says, you show your humanity by how you see yourself not as apart from others, but by your connection to others. That's the first thing. Yes, he goes on to say, we are capable of the most awful atrocities. And God weeps until there are those who say, I do want to try to do something. It is good also to remember that we have a fantastic capacity for goodness. And I think, beloved, that's what we forget. We forget that. It's easy to forget that when you're late for dinner. We have a capacity for goodness. And this just isn't you. This is the world, right? And he talks about Doctors Without Borders and the sort of things they do to go into places that they serve and all that. You might not have to do anything to change the situation, he goes on to say, but start where you are and do what you can where you are. And yes, be appalled, be horrified, be upset, be righteously angry. That's part of compassion too. We talk about the experience of 9/11 after that, which is, you know, we tend to have, I don't want to speak in generalities, but we tend to have in this country like kind of a approach when bad things happen. I think sometimes it looks like revenge. And I get that feeling. When somebody does something to you, you want to push back. But it's not always the most compassionate thing to do. Now, I'm not saying it should go unanswered. I didn't say that at all. I don't want anybody saying, you know, sending me a letter about that. Okay. So following the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, that the moral arc of the universe bends toward justice. And I love that expression, and there have been times when I wondered if it were true. I want it to be true. More than anything else, I think I want it to be true, but then I have to realize what's my part in that. And when Dr. King said it, he didn't say it as if God was going to handle everything. He said it as a motivator, as a way to do it. All right, y'all, there's some directions on the bottom of the page that sort of synopsizes the walking meditation piece. So do that and think about maybe employing some of the other methods of analytic thinking. I've not set the book for the altar, so I probably should go do that. Thank you. Thanks. Blessings. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.
Thank you.
Keep that joy in your heart.